Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, and we are 14 weeks in to the 2024-25 NBA season, getting right towards the end of January, which means another MVP update incoming as well. Of course, the All-Star teams have been selected, at least the starters. We are now just pending the remaining participants in that game, and I'll try and get a video out when that one is lodged as well. But the week that has been quite an interesting one. A couple of fluctuations as we expect. Some of the better teams back to performing at their best. Meanwhile, some of the worst teams in the league continuing to fall by the wayside and really showing no resistance at all for, well, essentially what has been already a wasted season. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into the review of Week 14 for the 24-25 NBA season. We'll start in the East. We'll start with Atlanta. We talk about fluctuating teams. The Hawks are a perfect example of that. They're 0-4 week. No wins on the week. Now 9th in the conference. And they are genuinely bouncing between being a top 5, top 6 team. And again, back to that usual spot they've been for the last couple of seasons. Of just being a playing team and one that is consistently filling up space. Onyeka Okongwu continues to be their best player over the last couple of weeks. 13 points, 9.3 rebounds, and 3.3 assists to go with 2 steals and 0.8 blocks on 2.5 turnovers. There's still the usual contributors there for Atlanta. Jalen Johnson still doing his thing. Someone like an Okongwu doing his thing. A Hunter doing his thing. You're still seeing Daniels as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and Trae Young consistently being their leader. But they're just in a bit of a rut right now. I don't know whether they're just trying to ease up towards the All-Star break, but they're going to have to put in a fair push from mid-February if they're going to make any noise come the postseason. For the Boston Celtics, they continue to cruise. Not really troubled at the moment in that second position, which has really been a blessing for them while they've been out of form. 2-2 record, defeated the Clippers and the Mavericks. Jaylen Brown, their best player on the week. 23 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.8 assists. Another all-star level season for him, and if he plays his cards right, could potentially be an all-NBA selection come the end of it. As I said, 23 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 1 steal, 0.5 blocks on 1.8 turnovers. Boston, about the only team that outside of Cleveland that hasn't really suffered tremendously with a lack of form. Obviously, the Knicks managed to go back to the pack a little bit. Indiana, with good form, have gone up. But we've seen consistently, probably when you look at that top 5 there, consistently in the East right now, a lack of fluctuation. They are really set in stone. And that's certainly going to be a bonus for them heading into the All-Star break. Can they break their hoodoo? I don't know. But they need to probably get on a bit of a roll here. The Brooklyn Nets, they're not able to get any roll at the moment. Lost every game again this week, 0-4 record. They are 13th in the East. Keon Johnson, again, their player of the week. 14.8 points, 3.3 rebounds, 2.8 assists on 1 steal, 0.8 turnovers. So reasonably efficient in the limited possessions that he did get there again. Brooklyn just stuck in the mud, not really moving anywhere, not going anywhere, not making any trades and wanting a lot for little in return. Not much happening out there on the other side of New York. Good example of things not really happening on the other side of anywhere. For all that could happen right now, the Charlotte Hornets could be playing in South Carolina and they'd have the same relevancy. 1-3 record, 14th in the conference. Got to win against New Orleans, who are essentially their opposite number as far as 14th seeds in their respective conferences. Josh Okogie, their best player, 12 points, 4 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 3.3 steals and 0.8 blocks on 1.3 turnovers. Playing both sides of the ball, playing some defense there, being efficient with limited time in possession. But Charlotte right now, it's just a real cluster. There's been a potential injury cloud again with LaMelo Ball, which could all but end his season, knowing how fragile his ankles are. I know there was criticism of Steph coming into the league about how fragile his ankles and lower legs were, but right now LaMelo Ball just taking the cake on that. Probably going to see the usual 55 games out of him, not much more out of Charlotte. Not being a destination team with no draft picks, they're not going to see much more improvement. Pretty much as per usual for the Hornets. For the Chicago Bulls, 10th in the conference, they still remain in that playing seed area, and they did only have the one win on the week, but they did defeat Denver, a team that has been in some really red-hot form, and certainly producing some statistical anomalies from their leading players. Zach LaVine, 23.3 points, 4.7 rebounds, 4.7 assists to go 1 steal on 2.7 turnovers. It's going to be really interesting to see exactly how the Bulls continue to play, particularly someone like LaVine, depending on what happens as the trade deadline nears in the next couple of weeks. If he manages to get his way, he's able to find somewhere to go and play elsewhere and get on a contender, then we might see a continuing rise of play here for LaVine. But smart money on it is that if nothing goes ahead, if he doesn't get what he wants and he doesn't end up in an ideal position, Chicago just continue to wallow away in the midriff there with no great success. Vucevic has been consistent. Of course, you've got Kobe White and Josh Giddey, but there's only so much they're going to be able to do. They don't have a guy who's consistently averaged 30 points throughout the season. The Cleveland Cavaliers, again, a team that has not fallen victim to poor form pretty much throughout the season, closing in on double-digit losses finally after 37-38 odd wins so far. Really does give perspective some of the great teams in league history, your Golden State Warriors, your Chicago Bulls, the Lakers of the early 70s, the Sixers of the late 60s. Just how impressive it is to go on these really unique seasons with low win totals. Donovan Mitchell leading the way. Of course, the one win against Detroit for the Cavs this week, I should say. 28.3 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 7 assists to go, 1 steal on 2.8 turnovers. Again, they've come out of the gates really, really hard. They're going to maintain that number one position. And considering how the rest of the league is fluctuating right now, they can probably afford to drop a few games, try and rest up a little bit and be injury-free, really give their roster outside of what's probably going to be 3 All-Stars a rest. They're going to be in a pretty optimal position coming out of the All-Star break. The Detroit Pistons still remain a top 8 team in the East. Got the one win on the week out of their 3 games, defeating Houston, one of the 2 best teams out in the West, and a genuine conference final chance out there. You never know, though. Stranger things have happened. Cade Cunningham back to some of his better form, but also showing signs of that inconsistency that certainly proved costly last year, albeit Detroit a far worse team last year. 28.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 9.7 assists to go with 1 steal, 0.7 blocks, 5.7 turnovers a game. Last week averaged 7 turnovers a game, and is really struggling to maintain possession of the basketball, but that's also reflective in the efforts of Detroit and shows how valuable he has been to this team. When he's playing poorly, Detroit are really out of sorts, but when he's been on, they've been one of the hottest teams in the league at times this year, and for me, there's no doubt about it, Cade Cunningham is going to be sitting somewhere in that top 10 of my MVP update come the end of January. Then we come to probably the most mid team. Midlanta is certainly a conversation that's going around at the moment. But a team that's just been really mid at the moment, they've managed to get themselves into a favourable position whether or not in the playing tournament. They've got a tough first round matchup at the moment. Either way, they'll be playing Milwaukee or New York. Orlando likely to be a contender at some point as well. But the Indiana Pacers, a 1-1 week, defeated San Antonio, and Pascal Siakam just continues to go about his business. A guy who you'll find out sooner or later will heavily be in the conversation of guys that should be there at that special weekend in February. 20.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists on the week to go, 1 steal, 2 blocks on 2.5 turnovers. The shine of Pascal Siakam certainly has worn off since his early days in Toronto, there's no doubt about that. And there was a fair bit of talk about his trade last year, but he has been consistently turning up for Indiana. They've been winning games, they're in a favourable position, but because they're a market that doesn't want to trade up to boost a better team, they don't get any coverage, and they really should. Over to the Heat, who currently sit top 6 in the East, and that's through all the adversity that's going on with Jimmy Butler and the constant conversations surrounding the team, their structure, and all those other factors. 2-2 record, defeated Brooklyn and Orlando, and Khalil Ware has turned into one of the outstanding rookies of the season. My only concern is that you've got a guy who's near 7 foot, and he has his torso is about the same size as mine. I'm 5'10". The rest of him's all arms and legs. 17 points, 10.3 rebounds to go, 1.5 steals, 1.8 blocks on 2.3 turnovers. He's a prime example there, Khalil Ware, of exactly what big men really traditionally have done, but now the expectation is that of, at worst, someone like a Şengün, let alone a Sabonis and a Jokic. He's a big guy who scores points, who grabs boards, he does it efficiently, he plays defense. That's absolutely what the Heat need right now. You've got prominent scorers. You've got a prominent defensive wing, guy who can spread between the wing and the centre. He's a perfect piece right now for the Heat. The Milwaukee Bucks, they continue to sit top 4 in the conference. 2-1 week for them. 4th in the conference, as I mentioned. Defeated Miami and Utah. Giannis Antetokounmpo just continues to have a blinder of a season. He's right now sitting for me as the best player this year out of the Eastern Conference. Luis alone, this week alone, 32 points, 14.3 rebounds and 4 assists, 0.7 steals, 1.3 blocks on 2.3 turnovers. He's certainly up there in the scoring race. He's certainly up there in rebounding. He's having another blinder defensive year. Numbers not necessarily reflecting it, but effort certainly is key. I mean, at worst, he's the 3rd best player for me on the planet right now. I probably have him as the 2nd best player on the planet and have for a number of years in that number 1 conversation as well with the Jokic. But what he's presenting night in and night out, what he is as an athlete, what he is as a person, it's just crazy what he's able to produce. It's just a matter now of the Bucks catching up and jumping on. The New York Knicks, a team that needs to start probably taking advantage of some of the poor form of teams above them over the last couple of weeks to be able to really get some momentum building and really shake up the top of the conference. They've tried to do it this week. 3-0 record, undefeated on the week, 3rd in the conference still overall. They are just pushing uphill to try and catch the Celtics and certainly try and bring Cleveland back to the pack. OG Anunoby, a really big week for him, and this is the kind of stuff he was producing in Toronto, stuff that he's been known to produce, and the reason he's been a perennial two-way favourite in the league for a number of years now. 22.7 points, 4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, to go with 3.7 steals and a block. That's per game, and you'll notice there's no turnovers mentioned there for a very good reason. Did not turn the basketball over with any of that presence. One of the most efficient weeks the league has seen all year. Around a 23, 4 and 4, 4 steals and a block, no turnovers. Can't ask much more out of a guy who, at best, on any given night is the 3rd option of this team. This is the depth New York now have. The Orlando Magic have managed to get a full rotation of players back now. Paolo Banchero featured in this one here, a 1-3 record for the Magic. They still remain 7th, win over Detroit. Banchero on the week, 20.8 points, 8.8 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 0.3 steals, 0.8 blocks on 4.5 turnovers. The other key inclusion, though, is Franz Wagner. Now, if I'm being truthful with how I rank the absolute 10 best players this year, it's still very hard for me to not consider Franz Wagner to be in that conversation. That's the level of run he had with Orlando when he was healthy. He's back early from injury is my assumption. I think he'll play a lesser role until that such time is fixed. But when you consider that him and Banchero have only played 4 or 5 games together this year, and the chemistry that they've had and will continue to develop along with the talent that's on this team, Orlando could make a really late run here in this season and really threaten a team like the Bucks and Indiana for that 4th, 5th seed. The East is certainly not settled by any means. Philadelphia 76ers, a team that went 2-1 on the week. They're still 11th in the conference, but with some of the fluctuations you're seeing from the Bulls, the potential fallout from what may be a no trade and the inconsistencies now developing again in Atlanta, they could still be a smoky for a playing spot. I just don't know exactly what's going to be happening here with Joel Embiid. Defeated Cleveland and Chicago, though, on a nice week for Tyrese Maxey. 29.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, 8.7 assists, 2 steals and a block on 2.3 turnovers. Again, the key for Philadelphia all year has been having their young brigade of players get involved, be the leaders of this squad, allow the old guys to thrive and survive when they're on the floor, but ultimately the success is going to come down to these young guys. Interesting stat that I saw floating around over the last week, Joel Embiid has missed 47% of his career games. He's missed at least 400 games in his career, played around 446, 447. Now, not a genius, but there's a big reason Philadelphia haven't been contenders. It's usually because of the guy on the bench. To Toronto, who have made a little bit of a run here in this last week, still 12th in the conference, and a team that if they stay fit, healthy and competitive, could make a late run, particularly with the talent of this young man right here, Scotty Barnes. Still 12th in the conference, but undefeated, 4-0 record. Scotty Barnes, 21.8 points, 10 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 2 steals and a block on 2 turnovers. They're the sort of numbers that got him an All-Star selection. They're the sort of numbers that are going to get him All-Star selections. They're also the sort of numbers that are going to drag people through the turnstiles and going to drag people to the franchise to play. Scotty Barnes is the genuine article. There's a reason he was his rookie class's Rookie of the Year. There's a reason that he fits in so well with an RJ Barrett. Of course, the chemistry thing is still a factor when you look at how much they have and haven't played with one another this year. But Scotty Barnes is a real deal. I've got a lot of mates right now who are making some serious trades now that Scotty Barnes is healthy to be getting him into teams to mix and match with their lineups. I don't necessarily rate fantasy basketball, but if he's healthy and he's producing statistically and the Raptors are winning, why not? Generally, there's no comedy in the NBA. There are a lot of laughing stocks. The business of professional basketball is no joke. However, the Washington Wizards still haven't caught on to that. 0-4 record, 15th in the conference. No wins on the week. They remain the worst team in the NBA, the worst team in basketball, and they are vying for the title officially as the worst team in NBA history. Bilal Coulibaly, 15 points, 4.8 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.3 blocks, and 1.3 turnovers. I love the young guys and their enthusiasm. They should just be as enthusiastic about getting the hell out of Washington. Over to the Western Conference, we start with Dallas, who have been injury-plagued left, right, and centre, but still managed a 2-2 record. And it couldn't be a greater scale 2-2 record. They defeated the best team in the NBA and defeated the worst team in the NBA. Kyrie Irving, their best player, 23.8 points, 4 rebounds, 5.8 assists a game, 0.5 steals, 0.3 blocks, 2.3 turnovers, another 50-40-90 week for Kyrie. And it'll be interesting to see what this Dallas team can do when they're able to start hitting their stride once again. Luka is still out, and they didn't hit their stride really until after the All-Star break. But with everything that's happening in the Western Conference right now, it's not necessarily a bad thing for them to hit that stride late. When you look at who has been performing and who hasn't been performing, the inconsistencies of the teams that are starting to make a push. I'm not saying Dallas is the team to do it, but it's right there for them at the pickings if they really want it. The Denver Nuggets continue to be a top 4 team in the Western Conference. 2-2 week for them. Got the win against Philadelphia in a game that Joel Embiid did not feature in, but that's not news. And against Sacramento in a massive blowout win for them, a dominant game for Jokic against probably the second best center in the league this year in Domantas Sabonis. Although there is a guy we'll talk about later in the video that certainly has a case. Casual week for Jokic, 28.8 points, 12.5 rebounds, 13 assists a game. Had the second game in league history of 35 points, 20 rebounds, 15 assists. I'll let you guess which Wilt Chamberlain record was broken in that game. I've probably just given it away. Huge work there by Philadelphia to not play Joel Embiid, though. He has been really banged up, as we've pointed out. No shock that he didn't play there. Just made mincemeat there in Sacramento of Domantas Sabonis, and I tend to agree. If Denver are going to be a top 4 seed, Jokic is probably going to win an MVP. The Golden State Warriors, a 1-2 record. They've fallen out of playing contention, as we know. 11th in the conference. Did get a win over Chicago, a team that has had a little bit of form. Andrew Wiggins, 20.7 points, 6.3 rebounds, 2.3 assists to go, 0.7 steals, and 2 turnovers. Bit of conversation at the moment around what Golden State are going to do. There's a lot of pressure externally for them to be pursuing things to help Steph Curry, and from what I can gather, Steph Curry's not really wanting to do that. It's in contrast to a team we're going to talk about soon, who want every move made under the sun. The other stemming factor from this, though, is the conversation that's now surrounding Jimmy Butler. It's alleged that the asking price for the Heat is lowered, and that Jimmy Butler may potentially be a target for Golden State. Now, if he's going to buy in to be a championship team player with one of the legends of the game, absolutely. But is it really worth all the risk, considering the drama that has been fueled around this team thanks to Draymond Green? Well, forever. The Houston Rockets, they continue to shoot up the standings and continue to put pressure on the top of the conference. 3-0 record. They are now second, undefeated on the week there. And their young gun star, he's going to be in the Rising Stars Challenge. He's going to be an all-defensive selection. And if not, he's certainly got to be really in contention. That's for sure. Armin Thompson, 24 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists per game on the week to go, with 2 steals, 1 block, and 3 turnovers. He has been elite for a Houston team that just continues to find ways, it continues to find guys to lead the way. Şengün and Green, clearly the 1 and 2 options on this team, and right now it's a real toss of the coin as to who that actually is. There's no doubt about that, but Armin Thompson's been a huge piece for them here, and culturally really starting to fit in. He's able to play both ends of the floor, doesn't get carried away like former pieces, is able to learn and reflect from his leaders. Huge tick in the box there for Houston. The LA Clippers have fluctuated sort of around that 4th, 5th, 6th mark most of the season here. And I think they're starting to really settle into that 5th, 6th range. They've been 6th for the last couple of weeks here with another LA team we'll talk about in a second. But a 2-2 record. Defeated the worst team in basketball, the Washington Wizards, but had a really nice win against the Milwaukee Bucks. So it does show that they're still thereabouts there in this league. Derrick Jones Jr., the standout for the Clippers this week. Not a name that's generally mentioned with the Clippers and consistent performances, certainly this year with the players that they've got. But 16 points, 6.3 rebounds and an assist to go, 1.8 steals and 0.8 blocks on 1.3 turnovers. This is just a guy who's able to step up, step out and really get the job done where he needs to. One of the prime examples of that really in comparison to someone like a Daniel Gafford or PJ Washington. I think Derrick Jones Jr. is really starting to work his way into that mould. A hell of an athlete, one of the most underrated athletes of this period of basketball, but he's going to come out, be athletic, and be efficient on both sides of the ball. He's going to be a key contributor. The Lakers continue to make a push and really trying to prove a point that they can be a contender. Set of moves they really want to make right now. 4-0 record, undefeated on the week, 5th in the conference. Big part of that comes down to Anthony Davis just being an absolute monster and again making his case for all-NBA first team, all defensive first team, you name it, he's making the case. 32.8 points, 15 rebounds and 3.3 assists to go, 1.3 steals, 2.5 blocks on 2 turnovers. But the usual dialogue around the Lakers has come to the forefront. It all stems around the team feeling they're 1 or 2 pieces away from being a championship contender, wanting to trade the absolute house for everything, and if they can't do that, trying to get rid of Anthony Davis. It just seems to be a really vicious cycle the Lakers have gone through. Here's a news flash for everybody. I'm sure plenty of people will understand it. Without a huge giant break, which was the COVID year of 2019-20, the Lakers haven't been a genuine contender no matter their roster. Nothing's changed, and AD and LeBron have gotten older. Now, here's a team that's making a run that if you really suggested wanted to make some moves, could, but they just have a really great balance right now and are effective at both ends of the floor, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies. 3-1 record on the week, remain top 3 in the West. They defeated Charlotte, New Orleans, and Utah, so took the absolute scraps, bottom of the barrel where they could, but you've still got to get those scraps onto the plate and eat them where you can. Jaren Jackson Jr., 25 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.3 steals, 1.5 blocks on 1.8 turnovers. Very similar situation when Ja Morant is healthy to that of a Şengün and Green in Houston. But I think that Jaren Jackson Jr. has finally grabbed this team by the scruff of the neck and said, hey, this is my team. And it all comes down to the fact that he plays both hands, both sides of the ball, efficiently, consistently, doesn't have any drama, leads from the front. He's the superstar there that doesn't get credit as the superstar, and he really should. He's a huge part of why Memphis are in this position, not only with the success, but building up from their indiscrepancies. The Memphis Grizzlies might be a team that's really on the move, but a team that has made a lot of moves in the last couple of weeks. The Minnesota Timberwolves, 3-0 record, 7th in the conference. They've been as low as 12th, 13th this year. Not looking like much, really starting to make some moves, though. Undefeated on the week, as I mentioned, and Anthony Edwards, one of the crucial talking points of all of this. 26 points, 3.7 rebounds, 6.7 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers. Obviously, the conversation for this team is going to revolve around the play of Anthony Edwards or the lack of consistency that is perceived with Rudy Gobert, particularly as a defensive anchor. But the main conversation this week has been around Anthony Edwards and his instant backtracking of what he perceived to be a lack of skill in the 90s by personally reaching out to Michael Jordan and asking him how he deals with situations in double teams. Now, smart move. Perfect move. That's exactly what Anthony Edwards does. That's exactly what he should do, because the only person active beyond that is Dwayne Wade. That's a major backflip for a guy who showed pretty much no respect for previous generations. Again, for New Orleans, they go from having this really consistent couple of weeks to the perfect example of what happens when you're not committed, when you're not playing well, and when things just aren't going your way, that they fall by the wayside really quickly. No wins this week, 0-3 record. They remain 14th in the conference. Trey Murphy's production and efficiency dropped. No doubt about it. As the leader of this team the last couple of weeks, so did their fortunes. 17.3 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4 assists to go, 1.3 steals, 1 block and 2 turnovers. Pelicans are back to square one. But speaking of square one, that's exactly where Oklahoma City sit at the top of the conference. Defeated Utah and Portland, got the job done as they needed to. And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, coming off a career game, proceeds to have one of the biggest weeks the league has seen this year. Over the 3-game period, 40 points, 4.7 rebounds and 4.3 assists per game to go with 2 steals and 0.7 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Just OKC continuing to rock and roll. Some of the stupid comments that have been made this week include but aren't limited to that of Paul Pierce, which, again, stupid comments limited but don't include that of everything Paul Pierce has ever said. That apparently, because they're playing so well, they don't need Chet, so they should trade him and get Kevin Durant. Well, I don't mean to be awful, but there is no interest either side. I wouldn't think for Kevin Durant to end up in Oklahoma City. Number one, Sam Presti's not going to go for a 36-year-old guy. And number two, why is he going to bail in on Chet when he showed so much promise? It's an injury. Injuries happen. The Thunder are still favourites. Speaking of Kevin Durant, here he is, leading the Phoenix Suns to a 3-0 record, and they are currently 8th in the conference, undefeated on the week. 25.7 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4 assists, to go 1 steal and 0.3 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Still a lot of conversation going on in and around Phoenix as to what they're going to do with Bradley Beal. Jusuf Nurkic apparently is all but benched, and it's all coming down, in my opinion, to a contract thing, because Nurkic has proved to be really key and pivotal as a facilitating big man to a bunch of guys who can work really actively off the ball without it in their hands. As mentioned, though, the conversation has also been about Kevin Durant being a potential trade piece over to Oklahoma City, and I don't think Kevin Durant wants that because, well, he still wants to be the man. He just wants to have limited responsibilities. And let's be honest, at this point right now, you're not taking Kevin Durant over Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. If I wanted to compare how good I think Shea has been in comparison to Kevin Durant this year, I think he's been 3 times the player. And there's no way that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is settling for a third of his efforts. Over to Portland, 3-1 record, still 13th in the conference, defeated Miami, Orlando and Charlotte. A nice little run for them and some really interesting production out of them as well. Denny Avdia, really nice week for him. He's had a couple of nice games this year, but certainly a nice productive week for him. 18.8 points, 7 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.8 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2.5 turnovers. Portland just having another one of those random weeks where they go from a team that doesn't look like they're going to compete against anybody, doesn't look like they have anything of substance on their roster, a couple of young guys that just aren't getting a break, to, hey, we've just gone 3-1 against a top 6 team, a top 8 team, and a team laden with an all-star starter. So I really don't know what the Blazers are attempting to do. I don't know what they're trying to succeed with. They're not having much of it, but when you're going to have someone like Avdia continue to produce as a role player, you know, there are positive signs. It's just a matter of whether you're going to trade those pieces to trade up, or whether you're going to be able to recruit someone to make the most of what you've got. The Sacramento Kings still sitting around that playoff spot. They're back into the playing contention. Were more playoffs a couple of weeks ago, but certainly back in playing contention. Defeated Golden State and Brooklyn, so I mean that sort of speaks volumes of where they're at the moment. Pass marks into the playing tournament. Domantas Sabonis, really huge week over the 4 games that they played. 23.8 points, 18 rebounds and 8.3 assists per game. One of the leading rebounders of the league, one of the leading 3-point shooters in the league right now. Double-double machine. And his facilitation as a big would be highlighted as the best in the league if it wasn't for arguably the greatest passing big man, let alone passer of all time, playing in Denver. 4.3 turnovers, lack of defense. But the main conversation again is De'Aaron Fox, because this seems to happen every year in Sacramento when someone outplays him and he's not getting his way. It appears that he is a trade piece. Is that trade going to happen? I don't know, but apparently they're pushing for the deadline on Feb 6th. Sacramento could be a different team. The San Antonio Spurs, only 2 games on the week and managed to split them. They've managed to find themselves back again outside of playing contention, but they're starting to get a bit of conversation around a potential trade on their team as well. 1-1 record, 12th in the conference, defeated Indiana, so not a bad pass mark for them. Wembanyama with an okay couple of games there, an average of 25 points, 11.5 rebounds, 4 assists, go 1.5 steals and 3 blocks on 4 turnovers. Many people having some criticism at the moment that Wemby wasn't selected as an all-star starter. His team not winning as many games had probably put him up there, but again, you've got to remember, people are voting on household names, they're not voting on production. Wemby's clearly been one of the 5 best players in the West this year. He should have been on that team. I'll tell you who might be on that team though, and that's De'Aaron Fox. some serious conversations that he might be the piece that gets traded over to San Antonio. What role he ends up playing, I'm not sure. Do you put him into a two-guard position with Chris Paul at the 1? I don't know, but that'd be pretty exciting and a key addition to the Spurs. And you talk about key additions. Well, the only thing that would be key would be the Comedy Store sign stapled to the absolute top of the arena here for Utah. 0-3 record, 15th in the conference, no wins on the week, and their best player didn't average 20 and turn the ball over nearly 4 times a game without playing any defense. Colin Sexton, 19 points, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists, or 5.7 assists on 3.7 turnovers. The Jazz flat out suck, and there is absolutely no promise in sight for them whatsoever. Anyway, guys, that's been me. That's been my review for Week 14 of the 24-25 NBA season. A couple of teams that are starting to want to make some moves. A few teams that are sort of holding the fort. A couple of others who might look a little more interesting after the All-Star break and certainly after the trade deadline. Very interesting to see where some pieces end up. And interesting to see just how some teams pan out depending on the success of the trade period and exactly what happens for their leading stars. The All-Star break coming up. Of course, I'll try and get a MVP review out in the next week or so by the end of January, and we'll also try and get an All-Star review video out for my selections for what would have been the traditional mode 12-on-12 had it been going ahead there. Anyway, guys, that's been my review for Week 14 of the 24-25 NBA season. I'm out.